Welcome, welcome. So we've got people rolling in. Hoping my air conditioner kicks on at some point. It's a very warm room I'm in. Paul, Michael, Genevieve. I think there are a few others coming in. There's Steve. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Steve, long time no see.
Yeah, we were literally just talking about GK.
Oh, that's so funny. My ears are
Like, yeah,
burning.
we'll see you over there. We'll see you there.
Well, I'm just going to give it another minute. And adjustments. There we go. See how that works. All right. How is everybody? Let me bring my focus back. It happens when I move. I'm gonna put my hand up. There, that's better. How are y'all? Just give a wave, and then you'll all get in line by putting your hands up. Happy Tuesday, September 10th. Thank you so much for joining up. I really appreciate it. And so do the people who listen and watch these things later on. When I end up posting these on my YouTube channel. So so they're there if you ever want to revisit something, they're all up there as well as lots of other stuff that I've posted over the last few years. So as always, we just open it up really to any questions that you have at the moment. And there was one question that I got a couple days ago from someone who could not be here. And they were asking about how to approach political reads. 'Tis the season, right? And she was sort of asking about whether or not we approach them in the same manner that we would a typical commercial, or whether or not they have whether or not they should reflect our particular opinions and the fervor with which we feel them. So that was really the question, like, how do you temper it, or do you temper it, or, So I have worked in political in the past. I have done very little of it this season. But my answer to that is I'm making the assumption that these are about auditions because the director will always tell you the direction that they want to go. So I'm going to approach this from the point of view of it being an audition. Is my sound okay? My little sound thing went a little nutty there for a second. Okay. All right, good. So I think you have to read the spot, right? If and there are different styles of political commercials. And when there's opposition, you can tell, right? If it's an attack ad, you can tell because it tends to attack either the character or the policies of the opposing politician, right? And in those cases, the language is very strong, and typically we want varying degrees of hitting those attack words, right? And that's how they're written, and they're designed to attack, right? And I think for audition purposes, if it's an attack ad, you might want to give one or two reads, one that is a more subtle attack, right? Perhaps a little more cynical, and another one that is just straight out attack, right? Because they're not intended to be sort of soft pedaled. The design of the commercial is to attack. So I think what you want to do with those kinds of spots is you want to pinpoint the words that are particularly biting, and you want to bite, right? And then you want to show some degree of bite, right? It's like, are you just irritating the skin, or are you drawing blood? Like, what is it, right? And show those differences in a first take and a second take, right? So then you have the type of a political read that is, it's positive. It is about the candidate, in favor, for that particular side, and they're usually highlighting policies, or character things that are of benefit to that particular person. And we want to do those things with a smile on our face, and we want to highlight highlight the adjectives that are good, and we want to highlight the positivity. And I'm trying to think, there are other sort of subgenres of, a positive side, and an attack ad, right? Sometimes it's a very measured spot where it's like, this person espouses this, while this person espouses this, right? And they're very measured, right? And they're designed simply to show the differences, right? And in that case, we approach it very factually, and in a very measured way, right? So the copy, I think what is similar about a commercial read, right, about a regular commercial read, is that the copy gives you all the clues. It's all in the copy. And then it's varying degrees, right? Varying degrees of smile um, for a positive spot, and varying degrees of bite for an attack ad, right? So, um, and again, if you book one, or if you book a campaign, you're going to be directed in all those very subtle ways. And as always, the entire purpose of a first and second, or perhaps third take, is to show that you have range, right? Um, and so, in large measure, it's just like a typical commercial read. So, um, I hope that answers the question. I know it wasn't your question, but I thought I'd get that. I thought I'd get that out of the way right up top, and then just open the floor and see what y'all are thinking about, and if what questions you have for me. Steve.
Hello.
Hello.
So, Kate, I just had a question. I had two, but I'll ask one for now. Would you say that there is, or what would you say are the trends that are starting to pop up? Like, we know that for the longest time it was all about conversational read, conversational read. Are you still thinking that that is the trend? Are you seeing it going somewhere else?
Well, I think I think a conversational read will always be on trend. Um, it's something we've come to expect from commercials, and we see it not only in um, the request from seasoned voice actors, but we see it in the request to have to use people who are not voice actors, right? And so I think it'll always be there. So I think that having having that read in your arsenal is always going to be good. It's never going to be a read where you're going to go, yeah, nobody's doing that anymore. It's it To me, it's a variation in theme again, right? I think we keep adding things to the tool belt, and when we add, a few things are used less and less, but they never quite go away. They never quite leave. I would say that there is a bit of a trend toward a more a smile, and a little bit more energy and more, I don't, what's the term I want? Um, I kind of want to say old school, right? In that, and you know, we're highlighting the properties of the product, right? We're using adjectives. We're happy about it. I think there's a trend of a little less cynicism in our approach, a little less, I don't really care, do what you want. It's a little less of that, right? But I still think it's casual and it's real. We haven't gone back to the, you know, Tide gets your clothes as clean as, you know, it's not quite that, you know. Um, so, um, it, so it's not, I think that that's probably the major trend I see is that a bit more presence, a bit more smile, right? And then a receding of cynicism, right? Or aloofness, right? That would be my take. That would be my understanding, given the copy that I see, right? And you know, I see a limited amount of copy. You know, I don't get the copy that you get, Steve, you know. I don't get the copy probably that any of you get. You guys get different stuff, right? So, I think the way that we can assess that, begin to assess that on our own, like I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just measuring it based on what I'm seeing, right? On the specs that I'm seeing. So, so I think each of us has to remain astute and even though, you know, it's kind of funny, um, there's still a part of the advice and coaching that I give that's like, ignore the spec. Right? So here I am telling you, look at the spec. Um, but we look at it in a detached sort of way. Like, what are they asking for? You know, as opposed to how am I going to fit myself into that little box, right? It's not really that. It's again, it's our objective hat that we put on. And we kind of go, what? And we ask ourselves, what's the trend here? Like, what are they asking for? You know, and over time we can start to pick up the trend, you know. And wherever there is ambiguity, you know, unless they specifically say we only want one take, you know, um, give them two that you know, um, that's a little more smiling and friendly than you might be accustomed to, and one that is a little bit more aloof, you know, and you've kind of covered your bases in a certain sense, right? So,
It's funny that you mentioned about like the one take and two takes because that is a different, not the other question I had in mind, but it sparked another question as to what you recommend because you mentioned ignoring the specs, but then would you say if the ability is to send two, are you sending the spec first and the
yeah,
alt second, or the alt first and the spec? You know what I mean?
yeah, I ask myself this every time I have two takes. You know, I go, which do I, you know, and the question, the answer, you know, that I come up with is I I sit back and I kind of and I listen with an objective ear and I say, "Hi, Jen," um, and I say, "Which is the better take?" And
Mm, okay.
and that's totally subjective.
Hmm.
You know, that's me going, does this take is this take more interesting?
Yeah, more
Is
believable,
this
more interesting.
yeah, is this kind of like what I think most takes will be like? If so, I'll do it second, right? I'll put the one
Ah, okay.
that I think is going to sound a little different to the ear of the casting director when it's my turn in line. Um, and you know what, Steve, is different every time. There
Hmm.
are times when I go, yeah, the kind of straight ahead thing that I'm reading here that I think, given what they've asked for, I think is what I'm going to put first. And I'm going to do the thing that I I think might not be what they're looking for, but shows some range, yeah, I'll put that second so they know I have something in me,
Mhm.
and then sometimes I say, "You know what? If it's if it's a comedy thing, if it's supposed to be funny, you know, and they've asked for a little bit of improv or, I will put the one that I think is the funniest first, even
First.
if and customarily, I would say, if I'm if they if they haven't asked for improv or something like that, but I think of something, right, that I think is funny that would enhance the script, um, sometimes I go, "Okay, I'll put that second,"
Mhm.
because I wanna make sure that they know I read the direction and that I see that they didn't ask for improv, right? But I'm gonna give it to them so they know I'm funny, you know? Um, but then there are times where I go, "Hot damn, that thing is funny, and I'm gonna put it first because I want them to know straight up that I'm funny and that I have facility with this kind of thing." And I say that, and I will never overstep the bounds of the writer. I won't
Right.
ever change what the writer has said. I might add to it, but I'll never rewrite their script, right? Because that to me, I am a writer. I don't write commercial copy, but I'm a writer, and every word matters to me. I've put
Mhm.
it there for a reason, right? And so it's a little presumptuous of a voice actor to go, I think I can improve this writer's script. It's like, whoa, really? you know?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I always keep that in mind. I know I'm off on a tangent here, but
No, 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 it's all
unless,
encompassing. Yeah.
yeah, unless there's some grammatical error,
Oh.
in which case I will correct it.
In the first or second?
Both.
Oh.
If tenses don't match,
Right.
if it's singular here, but the verb, it's a plural on the
Right.
I match them. Like that I will do. And if somebody says something to me like, "Why'd you do that?" I'll go, "Oh, wow, I didn't even mean to. That's just how I speak." Because it is, my brain wants to speak, wants my mouth to speak correctly, right?
Yeah.
It wants to adhere to the grammar of the language that I'm speaking. So,
Especially as you being a writer too, right? So
yeah, so I don't mind that. And sometimes I think maybe the script is being copied by someone else and it was an oversight. And so in that instance, I feel like I'm presuming the best of the writer, you know? But that was a little bit off on a tangent. Um, but ultimately, the answer to your question is which one's the better take, you
yeah.
know? And I do think it's subjective. And this is where each of us has to be bold and brave, you know? Um, uh, we make the decision, you
Yeah.
know? We make the decision. And sometimes, I imagine many times, the decisions I have made have meant that they passed by my audition. Okay, that's life,
Yeah.
you know? And maybe sometimes I'll send an audition and they go, that's funny. I want to hear the second take. And I get a second listen and maybe I'll get hired. Maybe I'll get shortlisted. Maybe I won't, you know? So ultimately, that's one of the ways that we learn how to sort of take control of our careers and we build our confidence, but simply by making the decision, of what's going to go first and not worrying about whether we got it right. We'll never know. We'll never know if we got it right about which one we put up front, you know? Even I think
Thank you.
sometimes, I've had callbacks where they say, "Hey, they want you to read again, or they wanna do a live audition. They really liked your second take." Well, that's good to know. Like, they made it through my
Mhm.
first, they got to my second, and they
Yeah.
liked the second better, so that's kinda interesting.
Do you
Um,
remember if in that particular occasion which the specs were? If it was if I know this is a shot in the dark that you would remember this, but just out of curiosity, was that one the specs were first or the specs were second?
in this instance, this particular thing that came to my mind was an animation audition.
Okay. Okay.
And I think that it was just a more interesting sound. It was
Mm.
just a more interesting choice about it was like for a news reporter, and
Mhm.
it was a bird. It was supposed to be a bird, you know, like a so I'm thinking about birds, right? I'm thinking like squawky little birds. And so my first pass was kind of higher up, you know, it was up and forward and very it was actually kind of irritating, you know, but I was like, well, that's all right, you know.
Yeah.
Noisy bird reporter, that could be quite irritating. So I'm going to go with it, you know. And the second one was a little bit more like what I would categorize as like a PBS, you know, a more, you know, so it was a little deeper and it was a little bit more, but I still imagined a beak, you know, like it was that kind of thing. And that was the one they liked. So I don't know why. I don't know why they just
Sounded funny.
liked that better. I think that what I didn't book it, you know, but I did get a call back. Um, but I don't know. I honestly, that was a thing where I don't know which one should go first. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know.
Mhm.
So I'll just put that one first because the bird was little and skinny. And so I thought perhaps it would have a higher voice and that might be what they're expecting. But it was a total shot in the dark, you know? So in that way, what are the specs? It's like you're a you're a newscaster and you're a bird. I mean, it was really
Not much,
strange. It was
not much else to go off of that. Yeah.
strange audition, right? Like, um, so I hope that kind of answers your
It
question.
did. Thank you.
You know,
Thank you
and
so
gives
much.
you some freedom, right, as to
Mm.
how you approach that. We're all going to approach it.
Yeah. I definitely appreciated the idea of respect, and you came from a place of you're a writer, right? So you
Yeah.
respect what they wrote if you're going to do any kind of, something different. But essentially, what are you feeling there? Because it
Yeah.
is a shot in the dark, like you're saying. So what felt better? What was more authentic? What was more
Yeah.
believable? Put that one
What,
first.
you know, and also when if you take a step back from it and you walk
Mhm.
away for a minute and then and you clear your head and you come back and you listen, like which one it sounds
Yeah.
better, sounds better, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
which one is more present? Which one is more engaged? Which one, I don't know. There are a whole host of ways of approaching that. And in terms of how we listen back, you know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so lots of criteria. And I suppose in the end, it is a feeling. You know, I tend to try to stay away from what does something feel like because I want us to use our noggins more and kind of um, get into a really objective way to analyze what we're turning in, right? So we're detached emotionally from the thing,
Mhm.
and you know, but at in the end, you know, when we listen back to something, if something moves us, you know, in a particular way, that is a feeling, you know, and something to listen to, right?
Yeah.
If you listen to something and you go, "Wow, that has no energy." Okay, well, perhaps I need to redo that one. Or,
Yeah.
"Wow, that one is super bright." You know, should it be that bright? You know, it's like these are the questions we should be asking. So, but
Because of that whole
you can't
you,
ever be 100%. You can't ever know that you're right. You can't ever know. And so, um, so I think we just have to make a choice and trust and send it, you know?
and be brave.
Yes. It's I've said this a few times. Like sometimes I think that's such a silly phrase in voiceover.
No,
Like
but
just to be
no,
brave.
I think it's very valid because how often do we hear that sometimes they don't know what they're looking for, and when you think about it, if they don't know what they're looking for, it can be a feeling. What
Yes.
did that make me feel? Oh, that felt right. It
Yes.
might be okay. We could bring them for a callback, and then they bring the mind into it. Wait a minute, how's that going to work for marketing and blah 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 blah? But
Yes.
that initial how they're whittling it down is probably a feeling too for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. And I suppose the detached thing that I am kind of getting at is that I want everybody to know that that there's no perfect
Right. Okay.
decision, right? So just make a decision and separate yourself from the anxiety of, did I do the right one? Did I get the right one? Well, you can't ever know. So you just you make your evaluation and you
Mhm.
send, and then you let go,
Yeah.
then you let go. And that's what will save your sanity, and that is what will help you
That's the detached.
um help you begin to become a director yourself, a director of your own work,
Hmm.
right? In such a way that you are that you're not being critical of your capacity and your talent.
It's
You're
subjective.
just making an evaluation. That was too slow. That didn't have enough energy.
Mm.
My voice wasn't this or wasn't that, or it could have had more of this. And all of those things have nothing to do with whether you have talent or whether or not you're good at it or whether or not you could book the job. It's just, what kind of an audition am I turning in? And I have to be
Mhm.
able to evaluate it objectively in order to turn in the best thing that I can turn in, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, yeah. So
Like, which hat am I wearing? Am I wearing the artist hat or wearing the casting director's hat type of thing? Yeah.
correct. And we
Yeah.
definitely have to wear those hats. We have to sort of take on our sensitive soul when we're actually doing the work. So,
Hmm.
so we can be really present. And then when we listen back, we got to put on the director hat and go, did I believe that? Is that
Yeah.
real? Or am
Yeah.
I just BSing everybody?
But I mail it in.
Yeah, and you have to be able to say, I think I was BSing everybody. I got to do that again, and
Yeah.
not beat yourself up for it. It's like, yeah, we all phone it in sometimes, and we just have to be willing to go, yeah, you phoned it in that time. So, plug back in and go again, you know?
Thanks so
That's
much for that,
yeah,
Kate. I
yeah.
felt like we were just chit-chatting, but I'm like, wait a minute, this is being recorded. There's other people here. I need to mute so somebody else, whatever. So anyway,
I hope I didn't say anything I shouldn't have.
right?
Right?
Because
That's
this is now
my
going to
thing.
live
Like,
on your
ah,
page forever. So anyway,
exactly. Who
thank you.
else has a question? Anyone in the shadows there? I know there are some people out there listening whose cameras are not turned on. Um, I wanted to share something with you while you're thinking about your questions. I wanted to share something with you that I just discovered from this. I don't even remember the guy's name, which is criminal of me to not remember his name. But he's like you know, um, he's a mindset guy, and I don't know how I don't know how I don't know how I found this, but I found it. And he was talking about a particular mindset thing and about how we change our approach and what we say to each other. It's one of those topics like that feels very kind of new agey and kind of woo-woo magical kind of things where I tend to shy away from those kinds of things because I'm like, yeah, um, no problem, Steve. It's really nice to see you. Um, so I tend to shy away from those kinds of things. But in this case, he kind of brought it home and like, no, it's not, there isn't anything magical about it. It's all sort of fact-based. Um, uh, so So it was about changing the script in your head. And I've been going through this. This has been a terrible year for me. Like I've been on a veil 5 times this year and I haven't booked any of them, right? So like I don't know what's up with that. And I have to tell myself the same thing that I tell everybody else, which is like, hey man, an avail is a win, right? I'm in the game. And it's been both for animation things and it's been for commercials and so I'm like in the game. That's great. And meanwhile, I'm like, oh, okay. I'm going to pay my mortgage this month and cross my fingers, like that kind of stuff. So that piece of it is very real. And yet the thing that I have started to say to myself is, yeah, why don't I book high paying VO jobs anymore? I don't book high paying VO jobs anymore. So that's the thing that's going through my head. Like, what is wrong? What's wrong with me? Why am I not? I don't do that. I'm speaking it as if it's the truth, right? As if it's true in the world. And so this guy's suggestion was you have to do a 180 on that. So what's the negative thing that you're saying to yourself, right? I don't book high paying VO jobs. All right, what's the 180 from that? I regularly book high paying voiceover jobs. I regularly do that. Okay, so that's not just a statement that's now going to come true because it came out of my mouth, you know? That would be like, oh, I just have to utter it and then magically it will appear. Well, then how come I don't, if I say there's $1 million in my bank account, wait, still waiting, like, how come that doesn't happen? So, but that's not the purpose of doing the 180. It's definitely to shift your mind, right? Your mindset and the thought that's in your head. But then the next thing you have to do is then answer the question, what evidence do I have that this new decision, that this statement that I've just made is true? What evidence do I have? And so I go, well, what evidence do I have? Well, wow, I have a track record of nearly 40 years of doing this, of booking voiceover jobs, lots of which have been really great paying, you know? That's evidence. That is evidence of the statement, I regularly book high paying voiceover jobs. And then I let it go. Then it's just like all I've done is say, yeah, K-Best, you're wrong. You're wrong about I don't book high paying VO jobs. You're wrong. And here's the evidence for it. Right. And that's what we're looking for in the things that we say to ourselves, right? About the truths that we utter. Um, And so I just wanted to share that with you because for me, it was like, oh, wow, what am I doing carrying around this thought of I don't book anymore? I'm not a booker of voiceover jobs. What else should I do for a living? Why am I carrying that thought around? I don't want to carry that thought around. So what's the opposite thought? I do book regularly. I'm not going to examine the intervals, from one job to the next, but I can look back on my career and go, yeah, you do. You nut. You're a nut. Of course you have booked jobs. Like you have a career. So it's the way that becomes an affirmation, right? Is to speak it and then provide the evidence to yourself that thing is true. So I thought it was a really great I thought it was a really great shift in perspective. So I just wanted to share that with you. Um, any other questions from any of you? Oh, I'm going to look in the chat and see if there's something going on. Michael, are you raising your hand?
I am, yes, yes. How are you
Fantastic.
doing? I wanted to, yeah, I wanted to follow up on the conversational presentationality or whatever. Does that, how much presentation do you, if it's radio only, where you know that there won't be any visual media?
Yeah.
Or do you? You just accent it differently?
Radio and TV are definitely, they're different. TV, wherever there's picture, um, the voiceover will very likely be approached very differently than radio, which has no picture, right? So anything with a picture, the picture is the primary storyteller. Whether we, process that logically or not, our brains are taking in the picture, and we're seeing it unfold without words, right? And the music is carrying the emotion in the spot. So what we typically hear that voice actors are, that um, we need to carry the emotion, right? That we are the storytellers because we have the language, right? And so we are the primary storyteller. And so I would suggest that, and have suggested, that with TV, we are not the primary storyteller, and we are not the primary carrier of emotion, but that our job is to support the music and to support the picture with language. That's what we're doing. We have a supporting role, right? So we're going to be more subdued, generally speaking, right? Always subject to the director, always, right? Um, with radio, there's no picture, and sometimes there isn't even any music, right? So that means we are carrying, we are always carrying the story. We are always carrying the narrative. If it wasn't for us, there'd be no story unless there's a jingle, and a jingle is the entire spot, right? But that's pretty rare. So we do have to hit the product name. We do have to hit those adjectives that describe, the benefits of the product, right? And again, I think as it pertains to auditions or the actual work itself, um, auditions, we want to show some variety about how animated we get. And you know what I mean by animated, how alive we are, how much energy we have, as opposed to not character animation, but how sort of alive and present we are. And how quickly things move. Certainly in radio, in any commercial, really, we add energy by moving faster, right? And so then we have to, with radio, we have to look and say, how long is this spot? And how, the energy's dragging. Oops, it's a 30, and this read is 37 seconds long. Oops, so I gotta then speed things up. And when I speed things up, I'm gonna give it more energy, and there's very likely going to be more presence in that read once it's up to speed, right? So I hope that answers your question. Radio is definitely, have become in radio the primary storyteller. That without us, there's no story. With TV, God knows we've all seen commercials where there's no voiceover. How did that story get told? And it got told by picture
Yeah.
and music, and sometimes, words on the screen that aren't spoken. So they're just viewed, by the viewing audience. So, yeah. So absolutely there are distinctions. Yeah. Did that
Right. And
answer?
I guess I'm just thinking you have to grab people sometimes while they're driving their car or they're
Yes,
getting ready for work,
correct.
doing their morning.
Absolutely. And that's why.
Thanks.
That's a big piece of why we, the voice actor, have to grab them, right? So we have so there needs to be, generally speaking, more energy. Sometimes, and I've done radio spots like this, um, sometimes what grabs the listener is that it's more subdued, and they don't expect that from radio. And they kind of go, what's coming? Why is it so, oh, right. So that's a different approach, but I would say that's more rare. And that's usually going to be probably a higher end product. It might be national radio, might be a particular car brand, that that has such good sound design that we're drawn in by the sound design, and the voiceover can play a more subtle role, right? And it's gonna be alluring to the listener. But I would say those are more rare. Radio is, I think, um, at least in the day, radio was a less expensive form of advertising. And so more, smaller companies could advertise and afford it, right? And generally speaking, where you have a lesser budget, you've got lesser writing, you know, um, And so you kind of see that trend if it's, again, if it's a major company doing major branding on radio, they're spending a lot more money. And so their techniques for advertising are a lot more subtle, right? Than gonna come down to Jim's used autos, and get blah, 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 right? Local advertising is definitely more in your face, that kind of thing. Local, regional, national branding, it all kind of goes out from there. So, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Good.
For me.
Good. Genevieve. Oh, you are muted.
I guess I've kind of heard that like some people will be like with a private coach for like a year or whatever.
Mhm.
And I've only done a few different private coaches, and I guess I'm always surprised by like I always kind of wonder, is there a progression of like, like almost like a classroom, like these are the topics we're going to cover, or is it in general across the board? It's just like as needed, like, oh, we'll work on whatever today.
Mhm.
Like, I'm sure everybody's so different from each other, but I'm kind of curious.
So what specifically are you curious about in terms of how a voice actor should learn, or where do different techniques fit? Or
Well, I guess sometimes like it's like if I'm doing private coaching, I kind of feel like, okay, like is there another lesson? Like, should I book another
yeah,
session, or like is there more coming, or when do I say, okay, like I'm gonna move on, and how do I,
right. Yeah. Good question. I mean, it, I think I'm a big fan of taking advantage of a lot of different coaches. Um, the more coaching you get from different coaches, um, the more you will see that there are many ways to approach things, right? And you will see that particular coaches, maybe even sometimes just by default, have particular strengths than other coaches do. Um, I think generally speaking, there's a there's a really generic way of approaching commercials, right? Commercials they have they have the brand, they have the product, underneath that brand. There are all the adjectives describing that product. There are things like price and sales and deals and APRs and, you know, um, stuff like that, right? That are quite common to all commercials. That's what they're doing. They're selling a product, right? And so to understand that very generally, right, to get coaching, um, what we're going to end up with is here's how you hit the brand. Here's how you hit the product. Here's how you hit a price. Here's how you make something sound brighter. Here's how you make something sound more subdued. Here's how you can sound more authoritative. Here's how you can sound like a regular person, right? These are things that I think any commercial coach is going to teach you. That's the job, right? That by definition, that's what they should be teaching. That's what coaches, should be teaching. And then once you have this understanding of like, it's almost like, what is an ad? What is a commercial? And our job as voice actors is to understand what a commercial is. What am I selling? They're selling something. What are they selling? And what's my part in helping them sell it? What do I have to do to help them sell it? right? That's kind of what we're doing. So then you get into specialty kinds of things, right? Like, just think of Cliff Zoman, right? It's like selling cars. Like, so that's a subgenre, if you will, right? Well, there are several different ways in which to sell a car, right? Um, so you kind of go into that specialty of like, what's that copy? And is this high energy stuff where we're moving stuff off the lot and it's all got to go? And, you know, um, or is it branding where we're talking about not really selling the car, but uh we're talking about wanting the listener to identify with the brand based on a showing of characteristics of the types of people who buy the brand, right? So that's a different approach to a commercial, right? um and I don't know that there are very few coaches that teach all of those things under their one umbrella. I can think of two, right? Nancy Wolfson and Tina Roscoe. Those to me are the two that teach they see every type of commercial come across their desk. And so they have cultivated approaches to each of those types of commercials, right? Somebody like me, I have coached branding forever. So I've taken that little sub genre and said, in this instance, forget everything that you learned about doing a commercial voiceover and let's learn this, which is very specific to this type of commercial, right? So I think the point at which we can say, I think I'm good. Like, I think I'm good for a while. I think it is whether or not you can look at every single commercial that comes into your inbox and you can identify it. And you can go, yeah, I know what that is. All right, I got it. Let's go. Let's do that. And I do my 2 or 3 takes and I'm good because I understand all of the subgenres of the big umbrella of commercials. And that I think is when we go, okay, I'm good. I'm good for a while. I don't really need any coaching. I can coach myself, right? Because I know and understand the medium, right? And that is not to say that at some point you might go, huh, I feel a little bit stalled, and I'm not booking, I'm not getting called back. I'm not, perhaps I need a little brush up. And then you go and you book a one-off with somebody and you go, can you check my read on this? Right. And you get a little bit of a tweak, which I don't think is it, it, which I think is plenty. Like you just need a tweak. It's not like you have to go back in for another master's degree in commercial voiceover. But I think that that's really it. And um, I think that's how we know that we've gotten to the point where we really understand what we're doing. Every time we look at a commercial that pops in our inbox, we go, "Yep, I know what that is. I recognize it, and I know the rules of this spot, and I'm gonna do it." Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Does that
definitely.
answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, and then also to kind of like how to know like when you need to switch like to another one.
Oh,
Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I feel like it's not clear when it's like, okay, we're kind of done what we can here, or we just continue on. Does that make sense?
yeah. It's kind of like, how do you know when to stop going to therapy?
Yeah.
How am I doing
Never.
on my own?
Yeah.
Which really I think that's the question you want to ask yourself. Like, how am I doing on my own? And I,
Yeah.
I think that's true of voiceover. I,
Yeah.
I think if you're still, looking at every piece of commercial copy that you get and you feel a momentary stuckness, and you kind of go, I'm not sure what to do here. Then I would say, yeah, keep going. Keep going. Um, whether whether you continue on with one particular coach, whew, that's so subjective. I think you have to, if you're feeling like I want to hear something different, then that's certainly your signal, like, um, and I think if you've signed up for a year-long curriculum, you finish out the curriculum and you let go, and if you still feel like you're in need of something, you choose somebody else and
Yeah.
get another perspective, right? But if
Yeah.
you just I think that's why I'm kind of like, for teaching brand imaging, I'm like, a 4-pack is really all you need. Like, because after a 4-pack, I'm just gonna be uh helping you with auditions, you know? And
Yeah.
that's a lot of money, to be spending, um, when really what a person ought to be the goal is that you take the coaching and then you go and you put it to use in the booth, right?
Yeah.
And see the fruits. And honestly, the fruits again must be how pleased I am with the audition, not whether or not I booked, because we all know booking is like a needle in a haystack, and that can't be the measure that we use. Otherwise, we'd all quit, because it's so flippin' hard to book, right? So
Yeah.
that can't be it. It has to be whether you look back and go, you know what, that worked. I am pleased with that audition. I am happy with that audition, and I feel like I got better, you know. Um, but I think if you're asking the question, should I try another coach? I think that's your answer,
Yeah. Good point.
really. Because truly, if you're engaged, right, with the coach and you sort of look forward to it every time and you go, I know, man, I know I got more to learn. And you leave the session like, ooh, that was a lot and I loved it. Now I'm going to put it to use, right? That's like, yeah, you're going to want to continue that. But if you're going to coaching and you're like, oh, okay, well, I just feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over and I'm reading this copy and I don't feel like I'm learning anything new, it's kind of time to, if you want to continue learning, perhaps just see if another coach has something to offer you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Thank
I'm a
you.
I'm a believer in consults first, to see whether or not that coach is going to be good for you, whether you like it. I wouldn't. I mean, I've had a few people over, not very, very few, but sometimes I had one person buy a 6-pack and we had never met. And I was
Mhm.
like, whoa, like, and this person had never, he's like, well, I'm a beginner. I've never done voiceover before. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not I refunded his money. I was like, yeah, I wouldn't start with me. I wouldn't do that. I'm super nichey and it's like after you've been in it a little bit, then maybe I will have something to offer you. But like that kind of thing, I'd be like, oh yeah, don't do that. Go do a consult with somebody, to see if it's the right fit and they can meet you where you are. Um, so yeah.
Okay.
Does
Thanks.
I hope
Yeah.
that was helpful.
Yeah. Good.
Good morning, Jen. Is it morning where you are?
It is 5 to 11.
Oh, morning.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Sorry, I've
Uh,
been bebopping around and I didn't want to be distracting.
no,
So
no, that's okay. There are
I
other
have
people on the call that I know are hiding. Yeah, I shouldn't say hiding. Because sometimes I'm on calls and I guess it is hiding. Because I do hide when I get on calls and I don't turn on my camera. Okay, let me see these. A question. Okay, this is from John Gardner. I've been getting increasingly intrigued by the idea of acting in video games and especially audio drama. How can I prepare for these opportunities when they come up? Keep in mind that I still work full time, and just so acting classes are not on the table. Okay. So, John, I'm going to say that I you you should take my acting for video games workshop. Um, and I'm gonna have one coming up in the fall. I'm trying to decide whether or not to do it in October or later in November. Because I haven't decided whether or not the world is coming to an end after the first week of November. um, but I do want to. Sorry, my camera keeps. There we go. I do think, John, that if you can find classes online, that are acting classes, that's what you need for doing video game stuff. And I think learning the intricacies of the genre, because I think you have to understand efforts and how to audition for efforts, and I think you have to understand again the sub genres of the video game world. There are more. There's like there's this is very broad, but there's like come back, focus. Makes me crazy. I can't move. I have to stay very still. There's sort of the Call of Duty, the war, but kind of current day type of video game. And then there's the heightened language that the world of fantasy, right? And I'm sure there are subgenres in there too. But the heightened the fantasy world is a little bit more like Shakespeare, right? And so and the other is a little bit more like being in the trenches. It's a little more Saving Private Ryan. It's a little bit more, so understanding the differences between those and understanding when you've got dragons and fairies and, like the language is going to be different. Even though the language may be written the same, right? You kind of have to understand the genre in order to understand how to approach the language of the script, right? So what you want is a class that teaches those things, as it specifically regards video games. And then you want to employ acting technique, right? And then you want sort of the specialty areas of learning how to do efforts. Efforts is a whole thing, and I understand the thing. I don't really teach the thing. I teach it on a very basic level, because even in games that I've done because I don't, and I've said this before, so I'm sorry to repeat myself, but I don't audition for games that are all about efforts and are all about that are vocally stressful. When it's in the direction that says this role is vocally stressful, I pass. I am not built that way. I've done it. I've shredded my voice to the point where I've lost my voice for weeks. It is not worth it to me, right? So, I'm not a person with whom you would study that, but I've certainly done roles where it is more character driven, and even with those you have to do some efforts, right? And you got to know how to do them, right? So that's a super general, but when you ask the question, how can I prepare for these opportunities when they come up? I think it's like any other genre of voiceover. You go find a coach specific to that genre and get the best out of them that you can, and practice, right? And where do you get video game copy? That's quite the question, because everything is on NDA until the game is released, and sometimes you get an audition for something and the game, and maybe you book it, you get an audition, you book it 3 months later, and the game comes out 2 years later. You're like, well, I can't use that copy. you know, for a very long period of time. So like the copy that's in my class is a lot of it is 10 years old, you know, and there are a couple things where I have completely rewritten everything, you know, and I'm still probably breaking an NDA by doing that. But I mean, I've changed characters and I've changed tenses and I've changed circumstances. You know, I've just taken the bones of something and tried to make, you know, keep the drama of the relationship, right? But even so, I think where do you find copy to practice? I think you know, like we used to do old school, you know, you go on YouTube and you transcribe something and uh you use it to practice. So there. How is your age a factor? 62? Meh. I just never buy into the age thing. I think age puts us into particular categories, and that's fine. We all get categorized. We all do. It's the nature of the beast, right? I am also 62. You know, I have things on my demo that I did when I was 32. My voice is the same. It hasn't shifted, you know. Um, I think I think I'm not going to audition for a 20-year-old in a video game. I'm not going to do that. I, I don't sound 20, you know, I don't. But that's okay. I get the roles that are 40, 50, 60 and above. That's plenty of work to vie for, you know. So I think all we have to do is go, yeah, how old am I? What category does that put me in? Okay, give me all the stuff that's in my category. That's it. Um, and I think if you're good, it doesn't matter if you've had a lot of experience or not, right? I think if you're good and you have access to auditions and you have and you get heard, right? And you're good. I don't no, nobody's like, well, I thought they were fantastic and perfect for this role, but golly, they've only done one role, so I'm not going to hire them. I don't there are probably some situations where that is true, but you know, I am I'm never one to focus on that. I'm just not. As she says as she goes out of focus. um so I hope that answered that for you, John, and if not, send me a private message. Okay. Emiko, I'd love to hear your thought on political spots. Okay. Um yes, I did answer this. Just so you know. I don't know if he's listening. But I answered the question in the beginning. It was the first question that I answered, and it was your question. Emiko Saraswati Susilo. I don't know if I said your name right. I hope I did. That was my best guess. But the answer to that question is at the beginning of this, which will be up on YouTube, hopefully inside of 24 hours. Paul, I'm a copywriter too. Hope to see you soon. 4 new messages. Let's see. Coaching never really ends. And as you move on, you'll become more attuned to what you need to work on and what genres are you're suited for. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Big jumping out. Julie. Jen, I don't know. I don't know what that was, Jen, if you had a thing. I'm just getting a name there. Anyway. Okay.
I think it was about a video game coach.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Julie Schiffling. There you go. There you go, John. John Gardner. Julie Schiffling. I'm getting this in the messages that she's a video game coach. So I don't know her. Can't recommend by experience, but check her out. Any other questions? We're at the 1 hour mark, so I don't want to keep you guys. Any last question about anything? All right. Well, wish me luck. I have my first Star Trek con this weekend. Oh my gosh, how long ago did I finish up Star Trek? Like 2021? It's like crazy. I'm so far down on the list of like, who are the exciting people to bring to a con from Star Trek? Yeah, that voice person from the ship. What ship? Oh yeah, the ship that was destroyed in season 2. So anyway, I'm kind of excited though. And if you happen to be in Nashville, come on down. Otherwise, I will see you online. And as always, hit me up. I'm available in the Facebook group. And I'm always happy to hear from you and answer any questions you have. And I hope everybody's doing well. So, all right. Take care, everybody. See you in a month. All right. Ciao.